I think if you have, a 5-year program with 30,000 activities in it, you're making it up. Like, you don't know that 3 years from now, this I-beam is going to get bolted to that piece of concrete. It's not true. You don't know that.
Well, yeah, it won't be a surprise then that a lot of my questions will be around scheduling. And so I guess when we look at the industry, you've been in the industry for some time. And when you look at how a typical major construction project is being controlled and scheduled in 2026, what would you say is generally better than 10 years ago? And what do you think might be a bit embarrassingly the same?
Well, sadly, it's a pretty short list of what's better, in my opinion. I would say that the integration of some of the web-based tools has been helpful. I mean, if you think about 10 years ago in the construction industry and globally, especially large projects, was almost all Oracle P6. And a lot of that the majority of it was desktop based, right? Even if it was multiple desktops into a single unified platform within the organization, it wasn't web based. And the opportunity to integrate other tools and data sources wasn't there. So I would say that's probably the biggest improvement over the last decade that I've seen. In terms of things that are about the same, the disconnect between the field and the made-up model that is the critical path schedule in P6. I think if you have, a 5-year program with 30,000 activities in it, you're making it up. Like, you don't know that 3 years from now, this I-beam is going to get bolted to that piece of concrete. It's not true. You don't know that. So I think that a way of integrating more closely the planning and execution side with real-time updates would be a great thing to see improved. And I haven't seen much improvement in that. And then I think too that the kind of the bent of a lot of the CPM programs that I've seen has to do with litigations and claims, that the ability to defend your position on a critical path network if there are claims after the project. And that seems like a pretty negative way to spend your energy.
As you say, I mean, who knows? You build this really complicated, detailed schedule, and is it just in your experience that people aren't revisiting it and manually checking, forecasting, or is it that, what's more around this real time issue?
Yeah, I'd say that I see the field work and the schedule as running on two separate parallel paths. That, I mean, even if you were to do an update bi-weekly, that 30,000 activity schedule is not actually driving work on the site. They're going to have their own little 2-week look ahead schedule, right? So then you're going to take that look ahead schedule, and maybe every 2 weeks, every month, you're going to come together and update your big 30,000 activity schedule. And then you're going to end up with some things out of sequence, some things that got started that shouldn't have been started, some things that weren't started that were supposed to be started. And then all these adjustments happen. And it just seems like a kabuki theater to me. Like, you're trying to align reality when really you should have one consistent platform that is thought out and is accessible to everyone and actually drives the work.
Obviously we just talked about that gap persisting, but what does that really cost the owner? You talked about disputes and complications on that side, but what is how would you describe that cost in more detail?
Jeez, there's so much to it. Depending on how you run your project, the contractor is going to have their critical path schedule. If you have an owner's rep, they may maintain their own critical path schedule almost as a defensive move, right? And so you've got whatever energy and funds and distraction it takes to maintain two extensive, detailed, logically tied schedules and update them over the life of the project. That's an out-of-pocket cost. The contractor is going to build that cost into their price, and the owner's rep or the internal organization is going to have to pay to have their own schedule maintained. But I think more importantly, the cost in execution and the reliable traits, we talk about having a schedule that's aligned and includes being risked and includes having the right durations given the length of the project and not having too much float or too little float built into the schedule. All those things add to potentially a lack of execution on the project. And that's where the real expense comes. If you fail to execute properly on your project will be delayed. And presumably you're building this because you want it. Then, if it's a pharmaceutical plant or a semiconductor plant, you're losing, or a casino, you're losing money every single day that it's not operating. And in any case, the general conditions is going to cost you money every day that it extends, or liquidated damages, depending on how the contract's set up. So I think delay through lack of execution is probably the biggest reason to do a good job in forward planning, and then translating that planning into an actionable schedule where the goal isn't more detail, the goal is better execution. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, you've talked a bit there about, in particular, critical path method, CPM, being sort of past its prime and having these issues. Why do you think it's still the default on virtually every major project?
I would say inertia, contractual inertia and professional inertia. Contractually, many of the contracts require a P6 schedule. And from a professional standpoint, make a P6 schedule so complicated, and you have to be an expert scheduler and an expert at P6 to actually navigate it, which then makes that person special. And so there's a lot of those people out there. And then after the fact, the whole forensic scheduling expert witness industry, which is an industry, a multi-billion-dollar industry, they're invested in really understanding and knowing how to fight over a P6 schedule. I mean, it must have been 22 years ago, we built a daily reporting PAWM app, and, it got assigned to a group of people and they wouldn't do it. They fell under the truck wheels or whatever, they wanted their handwritten book. And I think, there's some good reasons for conservatism in engineering. You don't want the bridge to be under-engineered, but I think that's a real thing for us.
Thanks for watching, guys. If you want to know more about construction and get all the professional tips, tricks, and AI advice from real construction project managers, follow this channel for more insights.